Dr. Santa Cruz, we're live, so whenever you are ready.
And we are welcoming all of you who are here on WebEx and those who will be viewing on live stream. We'll start our meeting by taking a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Lori Woods. In your moment of silence, if you would, please consider Ms. Jean Woods, former principal at Desert Ridge Junior High School, also a teacher in the district, provided many years of service to this district. She passed early this morning, and we offer our condolences to her family. Please consider her as you meditate and take the moment of silence. Please join us in a moment of silence. Thank you. Ms. Wood.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America
and to
to the
republic for which it stands,
one
nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty and
liberty and
justice.
justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Ms. Wilson, would you please call roll?
You're muted.
Ms. Lori Wood,
here.
Mr. Reed Carr, Dr. Santa Cruz. Mr. Carr said that he's going to be running a little late. He said if he can start without him. Ms. Sheila Ujetti, Ms. Jill Humphreys,
Here.
Dr. Santa Cruz, Dr. Santa Cruz, Mr. President, you have a quorum.
We'll now move to item 2, approval of this evening's agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ujetti. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphries. We have a motion and a second for approval of this evening's agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, then we will take a vote. Ms. Wilson, would you please poll the board?
Ms. Wood,
Aye.
Ms. Ujetti,
Aye.
Ms. Humphries,
Aye.
Dr. Santa Cruz.
Aye.
Mr.
Thank you, Ms.
President,
Wood.
you have 4 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. We will now move to item 3, which is the superintendent's report. Dr. McCord.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members. And thanks to everybody who's joining us this evening. I'd like to give a couple updates. First of all, the end of the year, we officially concluded the 2019-20 school year this past Thursday, May 21st. I want to thank the students, the certified staff, support staff, administrators, and families of GPS for their support, kindness, and understanding as we switched to remote learning. It's an amazing transition, and everyone contributed to make it the most positive experience possible for our students. Definitely not how you want to end a year, but we did it with as much style and grace as possible. So again, thank you to everyone. Last Thursday evening, we live streamed our graduation for our 7 schools. I'd like to say everything went smoothly and we didn't encounter any problems, but that wasn't the case. Some students were inadvertently left off the video, and for that, we are truly sorry. The company, VX3, went into action almost immediately after we discovered the mistake, and everything has been corrected. The affected families notified and students, and the corrected versions are able to be viewed on our website. Again, apologies from Gilbert Public Schools. I know that we've chatted about this in the past about holding a face-to-face graduation later on in the summer. I think it'd be more appropriate, depending on the ability to gather in large groups, to have each campus hold a celebration where the students are able to see each other and sign yearbooks, gather, etc. Again, not sure when this can happen, but this may be the direction that we're heading. Many questions and thoughts have been offered related to the beginning of the 2020 school year. We will have a task force that will help us determine the best avenues for students, staff, and our community. Dr. Newman will be discussing this later on in this meeting. And last but not least, over the weekend, Leo Doshbach, senior at Highland High School, became the 11th high school student in the nation to break the 4-minute mile barrier. Leo clocked a 33:59.54 at the quarantine class go at Oak Ridge High School in California. It's the first sub 4-minute mile clocked by a high school student since 2017. Congratulations, Leo. We know you will find much success as a student athlete at the University of Washington. Dr. Santa Cruz, that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. We're getting some feedback here, and I don't know what is happening.
Dr. Santa Cruz, it looks like you have 2 logins to WebEx open, and so I think that's causing your issues.
Do I need to disconnect one?
Yes. Okay, let's unmute you now and try that.
You are off my screen at this point, and I would like for us to take a short break while we fix this malfunction. So if we can recess just till we get this corrected.
So Dr. Santa Cruz, I can see you just fine and hear you just fine.
Okay, I can't see any of you. or hear any of you. Is there something I need to do on this end?
Go down to the lower part of your computer in the taskbar and look for your WebEx. There should be a WebEx icon down there, little blue and white.
I found it.
And then that should pull us up. Did that work?
And we're better. Are we okay now? I can see you all.
You're good to go.
Okay. I apologize for that glitch. Reports, item 4, welcome to the meeting. Mr. Carr, good to see you. Item 4.01, Dr. McCord.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz. Governing board members. Tonight we have our monthly budget report presented by Assistant Superintendent Ms. Bonnie Betts.
Good evening, governing board members, Dr. McCord. I just wanted to let you know that Director Jackie Mattinen is on the WebEx, as well as Ms. Pat Donahue, to provide answers for any questions you might have on this monthly report. So at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I'm gonna go ahead and go past the first couple of slides. Those slides are there for you to reference. I'll go right to the actual financial report. So on this very first slide, you can see that the maintenance and operations budget is highlighted, as well as the indirect cost budget and the unrestricted capital outlay budget. Those are the 3 areas in which we've seen some changes that have occurred month over month. As has been the case over the last 4 or 5 months, there has been about $1 million of additional spend in maintenance and operations, continuing to decrease the available balance at the end. But you can still see we are projecting over a $10 million budget balance carry forward in the maintenance and operations fund. In addition, if you go down to the indirect cost fund, Fund 570, the big change here is that we have adopted, we have actually gone through, because we're totally caught up in cash, we've gone through and verified our cash balances and all of what we would consider our cash funds to ensure that we are documenting the total available money that we have to spend in our revised budget. So you can see, looking at the indirect cost, our revised budget number 2, which is pending, has gone from $2.7 million from the January budget revision up to $4.4 million. Again, that's due to catching budget up to the actual cash available in that fund. And then finally, unrestricted capital. We have been allocating out regularly additional dollars to our schools to get, due to the fact that we did see a fairly significant increase in unrestricted capital available to us this fiscal year. You can see that our available balance is just over $2 million. I wanted to make sure that you knew that this report is through April 30th, 2020. So I do know that in early May, we've encumbered another about $800,000 of additional unrestricted capital. So we do expect the available balance at the end of year to be a little bit less than that $2 million. As you know, we generally have more money encumbered than we will actually spend. So we probably will end up with about a $2 million budget balance carry forward in unrestricted capital. So before I go to any of the other funds, are there any other questions about the district operating funds?
Dr. Santa Cruz?
Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
Ms. Betts, so with the available balance in the maintenance and operations being about $10 million, I guess I just am wondering, what is your philosophy? What is our philosophy as a district? I'm kind of, asking this in how much are you trying to keep in that in general? Like how much would you like to see at the end of the year in that moving forward? When we actually make a budget, what is your actual amount that you would hope, we would spend, and what would we have left over?
So generally speaking, as you may know, before the limit that we were allowed to carry over in maintenance and operations was 4% of the total budget. So that would be somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 11 million, maybe 10 million. So we're kind of right at that 4% limit. I do think that a 4% limit is responsible. It always helps us to have a little bit more carryover for cash reasons, for reasons associated with our credit rating, et cetera. However, I also believe that the money that we receive in any 1 year should be in that 1 year. But again, due to COVID-19 and the circumstance that have presented us today, I'm very happy to have that $10 million, and we are expecting it to actually grow as we do additional journal entries to try to recoup as much available maintenance and operations fund balance as possible. We know that our district budget is set for the 2021 school year as far as the legislature is concerned, but we're still concerned about what's going to happen in 2022 based upon what we expect to be a fairly significant reduction in state revenue going into the 2022 school year. So at this point in time, our goal is to actually maximize that carry forward, but as a general rule of thumb, that would not be the case. Does that help?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Yes, Mr. Carr.
Thank you. I want to echo Ms. Betts' comment. You know, she said this very eloquently, and I just want to echo that it reflects my perspective as well. We do want to spend the money on the students in the year that it's received. That's the reason that we're given those funds from the legislature and from our taxpayers and the community entrusts us to do. On the other hand, or in balance with that carryover and the ability to have a proper carryover, and that's the question for the board, and I think Ms. Betts' comment about 4% is very wise. But having a proper carryover has a large impact to the taxpayer because it does affect the credit rating. It means that with bonds and overrides and particularly with bonds, I should say, because it's debt, it saves the taxpayer money. So on one hand, we're holding money that they've entrusted to. On the other hand, we're saving them that money. So I appreciate her hitting both those points and just want to reiterate that.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. I appreciate that support of the process there, and I would compliment Ms. Betts again and her staff for the judicious approach that she is taking as we move through our budget year to year. So, Ms. Betts, please continue.
Okay. Going to the next group of funds, there have been no notable changes in any of our federal grants month over month. The next areas are state grants. We have identified the Classroom Site Fund Performance Pay as a state grant, as well as instructional improvement. So to start, the Classroom Site Fund Performance Pay is to be paid out around the 22nd of June. So we did go ahead and encumber the amount we expect to spend. And so we are looking at an expected $2.5 million in carryover in Classroom Site Fund Performance Pay. Again, that is judicious and appropriate. As you know, we did see a decrease in the Classroom Site Fund projection for fiscal 2021, a loss of about $40 per student. So having a little bit extra available balance will again provide us some flexibility moving into 2021 as well as 2022. Finally, under Fund 020, the Instructional Improvement Fund, again, staff has done the same that we described we did regarding our indirect cost fund. You can see the budget number 1 was at $1.5 million, which was back in January. Now we are projecting that the revised budget number 2 will be close to $3.1 million, again reflective of the available cash balance and making sure that our budget matches the available cash balance, which is the amount that we are authorized to spend. So are there any additional questions about that?
Board members, do you have any questions? It appears that we are good there, Ms. Betts.
Okay, great. And then finally, this is the last report that we will be going into some details on, which is our enterprise funds. So our two, we consider enterprise funds. Those are the funds in the school district that we expect to be self-supporting, so not impacting our maintenance and operations fund. So you can see our food service, food service budget, we did decrease a little bit, reflective of the fact that we have not been operating since March 10th or so. So we are receiving the National School Lunch Program reimbursements for the meals that we are providing to our families since the school shut down. And so we will receive revenues for that, but obviously we are not receiving revenues associated with families paying for their students' lunch. So that's a slight decrease there. And then in community school, the same situation where we are expecting quite a bit less revenue and still ongoing expenses. And so you can see the available balance we are projecting is $2 million. So those are the details regarding this month's monthly report.
Thank you, Ms. Betts. Any additional questions, board members?
Dr. Santa Cruz, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Carr.
Ms. Betts, you mentioned that the community, or the food services comes from both parents who pay for school lunch and from the school lunch program, the federal school lunch program. About how is that split, more or less?
Oh, I think it's about 30% of the revenues comes from the National School Lunch Program. Somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $6 million. Our total budget, as you can see, is about 14 million.
I think it's important that we recognize as parents that this, beginning to available balance, what's happened in the course of the year has actually decreased. We try to be very careful where we set school lunches. Our intent here is not to make money. And as you indicated, and I'll clarify hopefully even further, even if we were to have a slight growth in this, which is not our intent, these monies cannot be transferred to M&O with the exception of a small limit to cover overhead directly associated with providing the food services. So this is truly a standalone budget. Whereas the community school, and as you indicated, we first have to cover the cost of the services offered there. If it generates excess cash, those funds we can sweep in some cases to educational purposes or the normal educational purposes. So just want to, as we hit that, want to again highlight that for parents who may not understand that.
Well, and if I could add to that, our community school fund does do the facility rentals, has VIK, the very important program during the summer and during breaks, in which they're utilizing our buildings. So having available resources over and above an indirect cost allows us to continue to upgrade the facilities through the use of unrestricted capital and stuff like that. So there is some value to having community schools to make sure that we're also maintaining our buildings, to include even the repair of some bleachers, which we are presently doing at Desert Ridge High School. So just another added comment about the community school.
Thank you.
Any additional questions, board members?
Great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ms. Betts. We appreciate your report. Item 5, we move to presentations, and Dr. McCord, you have several presentations this evening. Item 5.01, 5.02, and 5.03. If you'll introduce those items, please.
Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members, thank you very much. We do have 3 presentations this evening. The first presentation has to do with the 2020-2021 task force. This task force has been established in order to address the needs and how we will be opening for our school year for 2020-2021. And I won't steal any more thunder from Dr. Newman. She will outline what this process will look like moving forward.
Good evening, Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members, and Dr. McCord. I'm going to share the presentation with you. All right, here we go. Thank you. The goal of tonight's meeting really is to provide an overview for you of the task force that we have created. And as I begin moving through, I really just wanted to touch a little bit also on the background. As we're all very much aware, we had our school closure in March. We began with our remote learning fourth quarter, and during all of that time, we did have a COVID-19 advisory committee that met. Actually, the committee met daily, and our top priority was for that health, safety, and well-being of our students at all times. With that advisory committee consisted of cabinet members, district leaders, dependent upon what the conversation and what the topic in need was for our students or for our staff, as well as feedback from campus administrators and teachers. And what we're now doing is we are shifting that COVID-19 advisory committee to a school reopening task force and advisory committee. With that, we're going to have some guiding principles that we'll be sure to follow. First and foremost, we know that we are obligated to find ways to serve all of our students, even during those times of disruption when remote learning requires the students to connect from home. That we are responsible for meeting the needs of all of our students, including the distinctive needs of students from low-income backgrounds, disabilities, English language learners, and others. And also that decisions are best made by consulting with those closest to the problem, including our school leaders, our health officials, and our community leaders as well. And my screen just froze. Hold on 1 second, please. Okay, let's try again here. Okay, with that, we do know that we're operating on some assumptions as well. First and foremost, we know that school will be open in 2021-20 academic school year, and we know that perhaps those reopened schools will need modifications based on the guidance from national and state health officials. And the plans that we make, they need to take into account both short and long-term solutions. That's really important for us as we move forward to know that we are going to make plans that are going to be inclusive of not just for the now, but also for long-term and how we can best support our students if any type of disruption becomes necessary again. I apologize. My screen continues to freeze, so I'm just going to keep sharing. I'm sorry. So the task force that we have, with the change, we've created the task force subcommittees. What we looked at is we needed to be sure that we had a comprehensive plan that touched all areas that would in any way impact us opening schools and making sure that we were ready for our students. So it was important for us to have representation from all stakeholder groups. That's district leadership, campus administrators, teachers, counselors, social workers, parents, governing board members, and community members. And with that, we're going to be getting input as well as participation. So there may be some that are participating specifically on a subcommittee, where we'll also be providing surveys to both our parents and our staff so that we can be better informed of what the needs are and what the desires are of our members. So moving forward, we're really looking at 3 scenarios. And I want to say first and foremost, with scenario A, we miss our students. We want to be back with them. And so while the normal has not yet clearly been defined for us, we do want to be sure that everyone knows that we are committed to being back with our kids. What that's going to look like will be determined based on our committee work as well as state guidance. So that's the first scenario we're going to look at. We're going to also plan for 2 other scenarios. The second scenario is going to be a hybrid. It might be that some students are at the brick and mortar on our campuses and others are working remotely. What does that look like specifically? That's what we're hoping we're going to get. That's what I know we're going to get when we work with our subcommittees. And then lastly, we know that it's important for us to provide instruction for all of our students. We might have students that online instruction is an option for them and the best option for them or their families. And so we want to be ready with all three scenarios and all three ways to help service our kids. So with that, I'll give you an example. Academic obviously would be the subcommittee that I will be leading. We want to make sure, regardless of the scenario, that we have engaging and aligned instruction that is continuous, regardless of what the delivery model is. We also want to be sure that we have an accessible platform for our students and families. We want a one-stop shop for our families. Our families were very kind and patient, and our staff was amazing at providing the resources that we could in remote learning. But we know there's going to be a need for some sort of platform learning management system that really encompasses all of the learning that the student's going to do, rather than a compilation perhaps of apps and other things that we were able to use in fourth quarter, but we certainly want to do something more than that. And we need to do something more than that when we move into the next school year. With that too, it's important that we have student supports in place. So within the academic committee, we're going to be sure that we are also looking at all of our students that need additional learning, scaffolding or supports, whether that be our special needs students, our language learners, or some of our students that are from perhaps some disadvantaged environments that they're going to need those additional supports, and for sure, regardless of the model. And with that too, we want to be sure that we are offering some sort of fluidity so that we're able to move, if we have to, from one scenario to the next. If something occurs outside of our control, we want to be sure that we're ready for our kids. So next steps. Next steps will be subcommittee work. We're beginning and initiating our subcommittee work this week. The advisory committee, as I mentioned, has already been working. We'll be working with each of our groups and developing plans again, and those plans will be for all three of those scenarios. That's what we're charged with the subcommittees. We're going to provide recommendations to the advisory, and we're also going to do an implementation plan. And that implementation plan, again, will focus on the three scenarios. It will also be an implementation plan that is short-term, getting our kids back to learning in August of 2020, but also a long-term plan, because what this has showed us these last couple of months is we need to be sure that we have some school preparedness plan in place. And it's really important that we can continue to serve the needs of our kids, regardless of what else is going on in the world. And we're committed to do that through this. Any type of disruption, we want to be sure that we are there for our kids in all the ways that they need it. And again, those ways would be on any of those subcommittees and in any of those areas. We're going to provide some updates to the board. We'll do some updates along the way as we do some subcommittee work. And the plan is that we're going to officially present our plan at the end of June at our last board meeting of that month. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Dr. Newman. Board members, do you have any questions at this point?
Dr. Santa Cruz,
Go ahead, Ms. Ujedi. Go ahead.
Obviously, when you talk about having, the mixed group of people, the only issues that I've heard from anybody about anything like preschool and kindergarten, I'm sure you'll be having kindergarten teachers on this.
We will. We also, kindergarten for sure, we have already had a couple of teachers, which has been great. We've had an overwhelming response, whether it be principals or teachers or parents saying, how can I help? How can I provide feedback? So we do have a kindergarten teacher that reached out individually. In addition, at the program task force that we have, they're going to focus on preschool, and that is going to be the needs of our younger kids. And so that news and the information that they learn there will be able to overflow into our kinder as well. They're going to be intertwined together.
And I have a second part of that question, Dr. Newman, but I don't know if you can answer the question. It might need to be Mr. McIntosh. And that is if, let's say we go back to the regular, just the normal start of school year, just like we always have, and a teacher or staff member gets sick and gets sent home for some reason because of whatever's going on, is that going to be taken?
So I will answer what I know, and then Mr. McIntosh is free to jump in too. Employees is an important group, and that is what the subcommittee will be working on, is looking at how do we meet the needs of our staff. Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Sheila, to answer your question, there's the Family First Corona Rescue Act, so there will be a bucket that we will allow of 80 hours that the federal government has given us for those who become sick, COVID related. It would not come out of their own sick time. It's a separate bucket for 80 hours.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Jetty. Thank you, Mr. McIntosh.
On that line, basically the quarantine time.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Dr. Santa Cruz, I did have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Ms. Humphreys.
Okay, so I do want to say I appreciate the guiding principles and the thought and planning that's been put into this, and I did appreciate knowing that we have a timeline. I presume most of these committees will be meeting remotely as we are for our board meeting and having a Zoom meeting or something along those lines. Do you know when you said you'll be starting this week to set those committees up, when you'll figure out who's going to be on what committee?
Yes, the advisory committee has already worked. When we looked at each of the subcommittees and we determined what areas would be really follow under the umbrella of each of those subcommittees, we have already developed who some of those members are. So for example, the academic subcommittee that I'll be working with, I've already reached out to them, and then we will be working remotely. We're having an advisory committee again tomorrow, and that will be remote as well for right now. We're going to continue with the guidance that we've received regarding meeting.
All right, and I wanted to ask another question about being able to switch from one scenario to the other. I did listen to a podcast with President Michael Crow of ASU, and he talked about, they're planning for different possibilities and working to have so that it's seamless. If someone starts in the classroom and they have to leave, they might have to quarantine, that they can still have a seamless transition, that there might be some ways of having them actually connect into the classroom. Are we going to have any of those possibilities of somebody actually connecting into the classroom to be with the class, even though they have to be remote?
So that I hate this. I sound like a broken record, and I don't mean to, but those are the things that we will be making decisions about for while we work with our subcommittees and the work that's done there. And then as it moves to the advisory committee as well, just looking at that bigger picture and seeing what we can do. We definitely want and are asking for feedback, and we want to get input, and we will ask for that, whether it be surveys or other ways of doing that, so that we do know what our community, what would be best for kids.
That I appreciate that, because also what might work for school, we have to consider what works for parents and their hours of work, because that might look very different as well. So thank you for all the work you put onto it.
Thank you, Ms. Humphreys. Ms. Wood, Mr. Carr, any questions?
Dr. Santa Cruz, if I may.
Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
I have a few questions, but one that I wanted to ask is, you mentioned surveys. Are you anticipating like district-wide surveys that every parent would get, or are you just thinking a certain grade level or a certain group of parents? I just was kind of wanting a little more information about surveys, in general, if you have any more information on that.
We are looking at surveying all of our parents at the moment, but that would be a decision of the subcommittee that will then bring that to the advisory committee and the decisions will be made. But we do know that this is going to be important for all grade levels. So we want to get as much input as we can by way of that survey for sure.
Okay. So we would just communicate like we have in the past through emails and give a deadline type of a thing and have it open, maybe a Google form or something like that where people can give feedback.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks. I think that would be important.
Dr. Santa Cruz, I would simply add, first, I'm grateful that we are looking at all possibilities and the ability to switch back and forth between those possibilities. And I certainly don't want to state the following in terms of saying that I have closed my mind to all possibilities, but I certainly hope that we can be back in person. And I know in the large majority of conversations that I have with teachers and surprisingly students too, they are all looking forward to being back in person and express that desire. So we want to do so safely. We want to do it within guidelines. I'm hopeful that the guidelines that the state provides us as soon as the June 1st will enable us and provide us the resources if they give us requirements. And again, recognizing that we will take data as data comes and make wise decisions. My preference is that we try to enable as many students to attend in person as possible, taking into consideration that some may be uncomfortable or have underlying concerns and we need to meet their needs too. But thank you for your work. I look forward to hearing more.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. I'm sure that sentiment is true of many, if not all of us. I'm grateful that, as you've indicated, that we are making preparations for a variety of options, including a myriad of approaches and a variety of data and information from constituent groups. So I thank Dr. McCord and Dr. Newman for considering as much as is humanly possible at this point. And I'm sure that as we look at the final product, we'll have another decision-making hurdle to cross once we get to that point. Dr. Newman, anything else?
That is all for me, unless you have any other questions.
I had one more question, Dr. Santa Cruz.
Go ahead, Ms. Humphries.
I have a comment. So I wanted to really point out that usually we would take a year to study something like this, really study it, discuss it, and that would take a year, and then we would take another year to plan how we're going to implement it so that we can do it really well and really smoothly and get all kinds of input. And we have to do this in 4 weeks. So we're condensing 2 years of board work down to 4 weeks. So please, people need to be patient with us and be flexible with us and help us to do the best we can under the circumstances.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. If we are done with item 5.01, the task force parameters and Dr. Newman's presentation, we'll move to 5.02, the opening of summer VIK and facilities rentals. Dr. McCord.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz. Governing board members, I have for you tonight Mr. Jared Ryan. He's going to present to you about our summer VIK program, which started today, and all the efforts that have gone in to make sure that our students and staff are safe during this process, as well as the opening up of facility rentals again and what precautions that are going to be taken for something like that. Mr. Ryan.
Dr. McCord, Dr. Santa Cruz, thank you so much for allowing us to dial in here via WebEx tonight. I have some exciting news. We had students back on our campuses today, which was exciting for us. As Dr. McCord mentioned, I'm sharing a document with you now. There we go. As Dr. McCord mentioned, and before I really get started, I need to really address that and say one, thank you to our cabinet members for their support as we have got the ground, and above and beyond that, where the rubber meets the road on each of the campuses. I can't say enough about the leadership from our supervisors, through our activity leaders, through our site coordinators, our site leaders, everyone involved, to talk about really dialing it in terms of what our community needs, the guidance that we've been given from outside entities, whether it be the state or beyond. It seems to have changed quite a bit in recent weeks, and everyone has taken it in stride. Everybody has been incredibly responsive. And finally, just a huge thank you for the patience of our parents. Parents have been calling in. So many are incredibly dependent upon the services we provide in the summer, and they've been patient, they've been understanding, and really given us an opportunity to create what we believe to be an awesome opportunity for our families and our students to receive the support that they need. So just to kind of walk through what we are doing and where we currently stand today. As Dr. McCord mentioned, today was day one. We opened the campuses knowing that our numbers would be smaller than a normal year, but also preparing for to be at our best. We know we have some restrictions. We know we can't take students on field trips that they're used to. We know that things are going to be done virtually. John and his team have helped us out so much by getting us resources we typically don't have. And so I'll kind of walk you through what students are experiencing, how we got to where we are, and some adjustments we've made to ensure that our students are as safe as possible during this time. As you know, we have 5 camp locations, all of our high school campuses. We've really worked hard to combine each of our programs, pre-K through 8th grade, which includes building blocks, VIK, and the zone. We've worked hard to do this based on recommendations from our families who are really looking to be able to stop and pick up in one location. Prior years, as you remember, we were stopping multiple locations. We were taking kids to different sites and ultimately not connecting with our high schools and the wonderful programs they were offering. So that move has occurred. Today was day one on our high school campuses, and we really thank them for all their openness and support of this movement as well. Great leadership has made that happen with Ms. Taylor and all of the work that she's done to kind of help prepare and support them as well. Enrichment, all through the programs, there are different phased-in approaches to enrichment. Speaking directly toward one as an example, there are babysitting courses that began today at Campo Verde High School that students can register for outside of the framework of their typical VIK or zone experience, which we were excited about. Also, and you'll hear from Coach McDowell in a few minutes, but we really want to tie into the athletics once they're up and running, along with STEM camps, CTE programs, and everything that our high schools have to offer. As of right now, big focus obviously is on the modifications that we were needing to make, social distancing guidelines, parent drop-off and pickup. Today, I actually had Jack Barnes, one of our great enrichment specialists, come up after, actually when I saw him throughout the day, and he said, you know what, I think we might do parent drop-off and pickup on the curbside from now on. It was smooth, it was easy. Parents didn't need to come in, kids weren't being drug in and out from their cars, and in the process, I think really has some potential of really improving what we've offered in the past. We're making sure a health assistant or nurse is on campus with our students. Staff members encouraged to, they're actually wearing masks each day that they're with our students. They're wearing masks when they're with our families. Hand sanitization is obviously of the utmost importance and frequency. Keeping clean, deep cleaning. Albert and his crew have been fantastic. The building managers on each campus have been fantastic in preparation, along with our crew and our staff. Each of the items are essential for different reasons. Some of it is obviously just on the sanitary side of things and to make sure things are clean and ready to go for our kids. Other is obviously with social distancing, having 9 students in a room, we can manage that. If we go beyond that, it's going to be a challenge. So depending on the direction and the recommendations being given, even if those numbers increase within our classrooms, there are only so much square footage to ensure our students are looked after appropriately. Right now, I received a good question earlier today from a board member regarding support of each other and how staff members are transitioning in and transitioning out for lunch breaks and having some time, because the key here was having limited number of people interacting with one another. So as an example, if you're a student and you're assigned to this group of 9 throughout the entire summer, you're going to stay with that group and you're going to stay with that same instructor, that same staff member. And we have another staff member who's assigned to give breaks intermittently. But overall, we're working really, really hard and planning very carefully to ensure that the commingling or the intertwining of people throughout the day is limited as much as possible. If any student, this is a question that's come up a number of times, if any student were to be diagnosed or a staff member diagnosed or a parent who they live with, and obviously our work with Jen Frost and her crew within the healthcare side of the world, along with Mr. McIntosh and Ms. Udall with regard to the staffing side, we're making decisions in the best interest of the campus, the staff members, and parents. So our phrase is communication is key, right? We know that. And in this case, it's even amplified that much greater. So notification of families, any students who are potentially in the room, any of the students who are potentially around another child, obviously vacating the area. Albert and his crew are amazing about getting out, disinfecting the area, locking it down for a period of time. We have responses to each of these scenarios that we've been discussing, as well as working through when it arises. In all honesty, I think it's a great first step toward the potential reopening of our schools. I think we're learning a tremendous amount, however, on a smaller scale, what our responses are going to be, what our support and communication is going to be to our families. And so I think it's really helped us take that first step toward reintroducing all the students to our campuses and staff members to our campuses and discovering best practices along the way. Operational adjustments that I've mentioned, the curbside drop-off and pickup, maximum of 220 campers within each particular location, 9-to-1 ratio. Employees are temperature checked before they come in. We have the temporal thermometers, so when they come in to take a shift, we ensure that they're in good working condition and that they have no symptoms as reported to them. We also have parents answer questions as they're dropping off in the morning. There's a series of 3 questions related to a variety of health questions, including parents being asked to take the temperature of their children before they come and drop off. Each of those pieces, and then their children are on their way into camp with us. Nurse and health assistant on each campus. Field trips, as I said, are going virtual. The final piece that we feel like was very important, typical summers, we run our program 6:30 in the morning until 6 p.m. at night. However, what that requires is far greater number of staff members in and out and rotation of staff members. And to minimize the number of different people coming on and off campuses, we've adjusted our hours just for this year, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we've significantly been able to reduce the number of bodies coming in and out and working with our kids. Up to this point, governing board members, do you have any questions related to the beginning? I'm going to jump into a couple different things here, including summer school integration as well as facility rentals, but with specific attention to the camps. Are there any questions I can answer for you?
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Board members, what's your pleasure? Do you have questions at this point?
Dr. Santa Cruz?
Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
Mr. Ryan, I was thinking also when you mentioned that the hours have been adjusted, I know that maybe that would also allow for sanitizing and cleaning after students have left the building. Is that part of the plan as well?
Yes. So both when they leave and, to be honest, throughout the day. So our staff members, along with building coordinators, along with custodial staff assigned, along with Mr. Dutchover and his crew that he also has working, it's a combined effort. And actually, Albert earlier today sent out a wonderful memo to everybody involved, really highlighting that it's a team effort, it's a group effort. Certainly, he's the one we go to in a case of a needed response quickly. But overall, it really is all hands on deck. trainings that have taken place prior to ensure we're ready to go. But yes, that is also helpful with the hours being adjusted.
Great. And then one other question. Were parents, what other, did parents also, because I think it's a partnership, like you're just saying, this is a whole group effort, including parents, right? And making sure that we're as safe and responsible as we can be and healthy. So what other requirements have you asked of parents? Did you give them any other information about, COVID or what you're doing before they signed up? Did they have to agree to taking their temperature? What kinds of things have you suggested that way?
Yeah, great question. So there is a waiver that they have signed, and it's a two-sided document. One of the sides discusses each of the expectations and the things to look for, as well as ensuring that prior to a child being dropped off, that we've discussed things such as proper hygiene, washing hands, taking temperature. The questions that we ask as they arrive. So there is a recommendation that there's a screening, and I should mention this, that there's a screening of children before they come into the child care center. And when they do that, the questions are related to, have you or anyone in your family come in contact with anyone recently diagnosed with COVID-19? Do you or your children or anyone in the household have displayed any symptoms of illness, COVID-19 related? And the final question is, have you taken your child's temperature? The waiver document, and we received a couple questions on it, and rightfully so, is something that was put together for all child care centers across the state, and something that we've asked parents to be aware of and to sign off that they have read and that they understand the pieces associated with it. And so, I wish I could tell you that I feel like communication's been perfect from start to finish, but I think it's been as responsive as we could have been based on the information we were given and when we were given it. And as things have adjusted, we've tried to modify our communication, whether it be parent handbooks that we have created, and every parent receives a handbook with relation to expectations for the camp, all the way through the adjusted hours. And so, certainly there's some things that we've learned along the way. Actually, Mr. Martin asked me earlier today, how'd day one go? I said, implementation in many ways was fantastic, and in other ways, we're going to be better tomorrow. We learned some things today that we're going to improve, and that's kind of our goal. Each day we're gonna take it, we're gonna adjust, we're gonna modify, and we're gonna be better. And I think we're in a really good place. I think we have a great service for our community and good supports in place, but it doesn't mean that we can't improve that, including our communication.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Thank you, Ms. Wood. Any other questions? Hearing none, go ahead, Mr. Ryan, continue.
Sir. Summer school integration is a piece I'm excited about. And the reason I wanted to highlight it and share it is it's showing multiple people coming together. And Dr. Newman did an outstanding job earlier. I always kind of think of myself as being on the cutting edge, thinking things through, being innovative, that type of thing. And it seems like every time I call Dr. Newman, she's already 2 steps ahead of me. So I have to re-gauge myself in that way. But this is another area where some people have gotten together, shared some ideas, and I think are going to help us long term. So we're combining elementary summer school along with our VIK and traditional zone programs, along with building blocks, and giving students an opportunity to take part in both, to both attend the camp as well as then have their set established hours for their summer school core curriculum and some elective course options. Those are a set prescribed time each day that we have a facilitator in a classroom working with those students. John and his crew, once again, have done a great job, and Leanne, of getting students devices in their hands, supplied them to our camps as well, so those students have access. So parents who are kind of running into that hurdle of well, summer school's only a few hours a day, or maybe 1 hour a day, or summer school's online and I have to work, or I'm going somewhere. This combined both of those and really kind of package things for parents, so that way full-time working families or somebody who needed childcare and support had that option. Doesn't mean they have to be there all day, but they can. And so our goal was to build as much flexibility and as much opportunity and option for our families as possible. And I'm excited about this. I think it's a first step toward having some highly innovative things for our families. I think that we talk about it a lot. I think anytime a parent walks in any of our offices, we have to be able to give them options, particularly in the time that we're in right now, with all the thoughts and the thinking and the looking and research parents and families are doing. We have to have options for everyone. And this is just, I wanted to highlight that for you. It's been a wonderful team effort to put it in place, and I know it'll build up as people become aware. Moving on to our facility rental facilities, as of now, we're taking reservations and we're set to open up on June 1st. That being said, there are a number of requirements in order for a potential renter to be approved, including submission of plans and how they're going to adhere to the CDC recommendations. Adam Krang has done a great job of communicating out with potential renters and creating a 2-page document that they're receiving, outlining what the current recommendations are and asking them to submit their how they're going to address each of those recommendations through their rental, whether it's a coach, whether it's a church, whether it's a club, whether it's an HOA, anyone that's on the campus is going to need to take responsibility for ensuring that this is looked after. So we're collecting those documents. We then have staff who are going around site to site as rentals will be occurring to ensure that they're upholding their end of the bargain. By any chance a rental group is not, then obviously we won't continue their agreement with us in those rentals. A piece that is, I think, just going to kind of become the norm for a while here also is the additional custodial requirements. There is going to be additional need hours above and beyond what we're typically used to ensure each facility is deep cleaned and sanitized after each use. And that's something we're working very hard to be able to ensure that we can do. It may limit the volume of rentals we can put in place for a while. That being said, we're very committed to doing it right. We're very committed to giving the community the opportunity to utilize facilities. We just have to ensure we do it in the right way. And so that's where we currently sit with regard to our facilities and our facility rentals. Once again, this is an ongoing, we will adjust as needed and based on guidance that we're given by people throughout the state and federal side of things. So that being said, those are a few things we have going on. Those are the pieces we have in place opening today, which we're very happy with. But as I said, we'll continue to monitor and adjust. And any questions about any of those 3 areas, I'm happy to answer for you.
Mr. Ryan, I have a question for you as it relates to the staffing regarding the sanitizing and cleaning. Is there a surcharge that's added to the rental fee, or how are we defraying the cost of that additional custodial service?
Great question. As of right now, what it's been determined is that a typical, let me give an example. If we were going to have an outside entity pay for 1 hour of custodial, at this point in time, it's going to be an hour and a half of custodial. So essentially, adding 50% to the typical custodial charges. If it was going to take 4 hours of custodial, it's now going to take 6 hours of custodial. And that's through discussions with building managers and working through specific facilities. And once again, if it needs to adjust, we'll have to adjust. But that's being communicated with our renters as well, that increase.
And the additional funding for sanitizing agents and the like, where will that come from?
That comes from the increase in the rental itself through that custodial increase. That'll also go to purchasing supplies.
Thank you, sir. Board members, any other questions for Mr. Ryan?
Dr. Santa Cruz, I have a question. I have one as well.
You want to go first, Mrs. Humphries?
Certainly. The question I have is, you talked about summer school and the summer camps that these kids will be able to go in and take some of the elementary school classes. I guess I'm a little confused. this is a summer school at the school for those who are already there for the summer camp. The rest of our elementary students would be taking that summer school class at home online. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So this is created to give access to the students who are in our full day summer camps. What we've had discussion with parents regarding is their desire for students to be able to access the summer school classes, but their need is full day childcare. And so we were able to work with John to get some devices over to each of our high schools for our students to be able to access their courses while they're in our camps. So we felt as though that was a great way of addressing a community need.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Uggetti.
Based on our guidelines, or the guidelines that you have right now, and I know they could do that as but what will happen? Let's just say that, you know, a student or a child that's there, or one of the staff.
So if a staff member tests positive, that staff member is removed for obviously until they are cleared by doctors in a set number of days, along with our working with Mr. McIntosh. We then look at any staff members that individual came into contact with or had contact with. Those individuals are then reassigned to home for the 80 hours that he was referring to earlier. That is 10 working days. They would be reassigned to home, and at that point in time, symptom-free, they can come back to work. If it's a staff member who has been with children, notification goes immediately to those families regarding that staff member. The location where that staff member was working is immediately shut down. Deep clean, sanitize throughout the evening. It'll remain closed for a specified number of hours, and I'm dropping what that number of hours is right now, but Albert and I worked together on that on a previous in a previous room, and then those students that are part of that class return the next day into a different environment.
The 14 days or whatever it is.
I'm sorry, Sheila, you were cutting out.
Right now, if let's say it's the staff member that's working with the students, those students would not have to be quarantined or whatever it is. They come back the next day.
So that conversation would definitely, it would come down to the contact that staff member had with the students. So if the staff member, once again, we're to be keeping our space from the student. The staff member is wearing a mask. Based on recommendations, the students do not have to be removed from the environment. Obviously, communication to each of the families and them being given all information that we have in order to make the best decision for their children. However, the pieces we put into place in terms of staff wearing masks, the social distancing, would not require that students would have to stay home.
Thank you, Ms. Uggetti. Any additional questions? Seeing none, then we will move to item 5.03, the reopening and phased approach to summer athletics. Dr. McCord.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz. Governing board members, I have for you tonight our District Athletic Director, Steve McDowell. He is going to talk to you about the approach we're going to take to open up the athletics for our students moving through the summer. We don't have any guidance from the AIA at this time, and nor do I think we will based on this, but Steve will definitely give you some details on how, like Jared did, on how we're going to keep kids safe and the levels at which we're going to move through this. Mr. McDowell.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz, board members, Dr. McCord. First of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity tonight. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, you're good, Steve.
Okay, good. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. This is a project that the other athletic directors, myself, have been working on for about 3 weeks now. We were asked to do so by cabinet. We appreciate their leadership and guidance in this. Because of that, we are quite a bit ahead of most of the districts around us. Since we started this process, a lot of new information has come out. So this has been a very flexible document, and it will continue to be flexible based on the latest data and information we get from Arizona Department of Health, the CDC, and other sports organizations around the country as they go on through the same process of starting to start up athletics again. I'd like to try and share a document with you as we go through this. Let's see, where is it?
Is it a Google slideshow, Steve?
Yes, it is.
If it's open in your browser, then you should be able to click on the tab.
There we go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so this is the plan that we currently have put together. As I said, it was in conjunction with the other athletic directors, a lot of talk with Jared Ryan as well, and some of the things that they are bringing forward and as far as opening up of their camps. So we've had a lot of the same discussions. First of all, I'd like to talk about just the basics. What's that?
It's not being shared.
Go back to your shared content again, and then you should be able to click on it.
So I go to share content. And then just click on it on top.
On your browser, yeah.
It's just, can you see that now? It's only on my screen for some reason.
Why don't you go ahead and keep talking, and I'll see if I can share it on my side.
Okay, thanks. So first of all, the overall guidelines, regardless of what stage we're in, and we had it originally called it as phases. I've changed that to stages because there was some confusion in what level we would be in compared to the districts around us and also to the state and CDC. So we're going to call our levels. So regardless of what level we're in, we're encouraging kids who are sick to stay home. Adults as well, anybody who's high risk, we're encouraging them to stay home. Like Jared just mentioned, we will have a COVID-19 awareness waiver before people come on and are allowed to work out. All workouts are voluntary. We'll take attendance at every workout. So should there be a case where somebody has been exposed, we can be specific about who we need to contact and who they may have come in contact with. We're asking coaches to arrange kids or athletes in groups or cohorts to isolate their exposure. So if there is somebody exposed, we'll know specifically who they worked out with during this time. Pre-screening will take place. We're encouraging that to take place at home, but there will be questions asked when they come to work out as well. Athletes won't be allowed in locker rooms. We will have comprehensive protocol that we'll follow for sanitization. Mainly, we're following the guidelines that were put out by the Arizona Department of Health to the gyms and health clubs in the state. Before they opened up, there were guidelines they had to have, so we're following. We'll have no centralized water or refreshments offered. No sharing of equipment as far as personal equipment like shoes, towels, uniforms, stuff like that. We'll also have guidelines for limited for social distancing for any spectators that may come in the higher levels. Any questions before I get into the levels? Do we have any questions on anything there? Okay, thanks. So phase one, like I said, that's now been changed to level one. So I had the latest copy of, but this will be good for now. But the participants will remain 6 feet apart. The first level is really a 2-week period where we're concentrating on individual athletes getting back in shape, since a lot of them haven't been able to do so. So there's a huge focus on that. Groups won't exceed 30 per field or court. And obviously that might have to be less based on the CDC guidelines and the 6 feet remaining 6 feet apart. No sharing of water equipment. Practice times will be set to maximize social distancing as far as timing in and time out. In our weight rooms or anytime the kids will be using equipment, we will wipe down all the equipment when each group comes in, and then we will wipe it down again before they leave. So the equipment will get wiped down twice in between each workout. I've already purchased through my rental account, I've already purchased 500 microfiber towels for each campus, as well as a lot of cleaning supplies from Hilliard, the supplies they recommended to do that. So we're ready to go with all that. We also have a maximum of 2 hours per athlete per day in this first phase. Once again, we're trying to make sure that kids come back and are eased into getting back in shape. Level 2, there will be small group training introduced. Balls can be passed in between participants in level 2. There will be no contact or one-on-one competitive drills yet. Participants can go up to 50 at this point. Still no sharing of personal equipment. Still maximizing social distancing and still having a maximum of 2 hours in between workouts, or excuse me, per day per athlete. Level 3 would introduce controlled scrimmages and practices games, more live situations in a controlled setting. Physical contact would be allowed, but still minimized. No limitation for the number of participants on the field. We would still recommend no travel or overnight stay for events at this point. And then once again, no sharing of water or any other personal equipment, maximize social distancing. And if we have a student who joins us late and they haven't been through level 1 or level 2 with this, we're recommending that they're not allowed to go into level 3 until they have had at least 8 days of training at level 1 or level 2. Once again, we want to put a high emphasis, especially with heat in Arizona, we want to put a high emphasis on the fact that the kids' general overall conditioning is appropriate for for whatever drills the coaches are asking them to do. The final level 4, is basically a return to play without restriction. There would still be recommendations of social distancing with spectators or anybody else that might come, whether it's games or practices. We would still follow social distancing guidelines for fans. And those are the 4 levels. Happy to answer any questions you might have at this time. Since we've started this document, I might add, as Dr. McCord suggested, or just informed us, the AIA is coming out with guidelines on Thursday. We don't expect those to be real restrictive. The AIA as an association has never really been restrictive as far as that. They've left those kind of decisions up to individual districts. For example, when we started this whole process with COVID-19, sports were officially canceled, but we weren't given any other guidelines as far as what coaches and athletes could or couldn't do. That was left up to individual districts. I anticipate that the guidelines that we get from them on Thursday will be very similar. they'll be less restrictive rather than more restrictive.
Mr. McDowell and Dr. Cord, I suspect, and I don't want to preempt you, but I suspect that the presentations that we're receiving this evening, this one and the previous, that when they're finalized will also be available for review on our website. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I have had some questions. How do we know when we go from level 1 to level 2 or level 2 to level 3? The only one we put a timeline on was level 1 because that is basically a chance for kids to get acclimated once again to sport. So we put a 2-week minimum on the level 1. Progression after that, there's no timeline. It'll depend upon, number one, how well we follow the guidelines of level 1. It'll also depend upon the social norms as far as social distancing and stuff like that. So beyond level 1, we know that level 1 will be a minimum of 2 weeks. It could be a month, or after 2 weeks, we might be ready to go on to level 2. But the progression through these levels will really depend upon what's going on in the rest of the state.
Board members, any questions for Mr. McDowell at this point?
Dr. Santa Cruz, I did have a question.
Ms. Humphries.
I was just interested to know, a lot of these are summer camps that students are participating in. Is there a time of day as far as especially outside with the summer heat? Are these more morning camps or later in the evening when it's cooler? What are the circumstances if they're outside?
Like any other year, the training that takes place outside usually takes place early in the morning or later at night. Yes.
Okay.
And these guidelines are specifically for our coaches working with our kids. If they're going to run a camp, in those cases, they usually rent the facility. So they will also meet all the guidelines that Jared, Ryan, and the facilities department came up with as far as they're going to have to show how they can run their camp and still follow the CDC guidelines and all that. So we don't specifically address camps in this because that's a separate issue. The guidelines will be the same for both though, whether the coach is running a camp or working with our kids for free, just giving up their time, the recommendations and guidelines will be the same.
Okay, but this is more, what you're talking about is more if you're on the volleyball team or the softball team or something to come in and get extra practice.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any additional questions, board members?
Dr. Santa Cruz?
Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
Mr. McDowell, I just wondered, how do these guidelines fit in with other programs, sports programs, and their reopening in our state at the high school level, as well as other things that we're seeing as far as colleges, different things across the nation?
Thank you. First of all, the NCAA just cleared athletes to start working with their coaches, just like our level 1, basically in the conditioning phase. They're going to start June 1st. We have one district neighboring us that started today. We have 3 other districts that neighbor us that are also looking to start June 1st. I did find there's another one in East Valley that's going to start June 8th. There is one district that has already declared they're not going to do anything until July 1st. So since we started this whole process, obviously now the NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, they've all come out with their plans to move forward as well. We're definitely not more aggressive than any of those. We will always take health and safety of our athletes first and foremost. And if we don't feel we can keep them safe, then we're not going to progress from one level to the next.
I have another question for Mr. McDowell. Mr. McDowell, when we make these decisions about moving from level 1 to level 2, will that be district-wide or will that be a school-by-school decision?
No, for us, it'll be district-wide. We'll make that decision, once again, based on what the guidelines from Arizona Department of Health, CDC, and those will be district-wide. So everybody in the district will be on the same page.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And pending board approval tonight, we have a meeting set up, a WebEx meeting with all the coaches and ADs to present this to them to make sure we start off all on the same page. And that'll take place Thursday morning.
And let me just clarify, this isn't up for an action item. It's more of a discussion. So if we get the sense that this shouldn't move forward, we won't, but that's not necessarily what I'm hearing at this time.
Board members, anything else?
Yes, I do have a couple questions. Ms. Wood asked
Go
one
ahead,
of those.
Mr. Carr.
Thank you. Ms. Wood already asked one of those questions, and I think it's important that we know what our neighboring districts do. And particularly, I think it is relevant to learn from some of the professional athletic associations. While, yes, there are very different requirements, they certainly have the resources and the medical staffs and so on that we can learn from them, even if we have to apply it differently. But you talked about not yet having all the criteria to move from phase 1 to phase 2. We in our state haven't seen the state adopt a phase approach towards the state or towards cities, but some of our neighboring states have done that, and we've seen them set criteria. And they've actually taken some counties and gone to lower criterias, and then as numbers have changed, they've gone back to more restrictive. Is there any possibility of that with these? Are we looking at setting criteria that we might go from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 and then back to phase 2? And if we see a jump in neighboring numbers within our zip codes or something like that?
Great question. We don't anticipate that we would have to do that, but obviously, if there is, should we have kids who come down with COVID-19, or we find that it was possibly spread from one of our athletes to another through these workouts, then we certainly wouldn't hesitate to be more restrictive and pull back and go back to a level 1 or go back to a 2-week probationary period where we don't do anything. I'm encouraged by the fact that since the health clubs and stuff have opened up, at least I haven't heard of any cases where somebody's gotten COVID-19 in a health club that's been documented. So that I'm encouraged by that. I think we do have a lot of guidelines in place that will definitely help prevent that from happening. Should it happen, we'll definitely be prepared to put everything on hold, but hopefully that won't happen.
Thank you, Mr. McDowell. And I would echo that. Our health clubs in our state have only been open for a week or two, but I know our neighboring state opened their health clubs a little bit over a month ago. Right. And have not seen any issues. As you stated, I think safety is our #1 concern. But again, recognizing safety is our #1 concern, to reiterate that, allowing the whatever levels of normalcy we possibly can. There's the safety in COVID, but assuming that athletics move forward, if we don't let these kids have proper training, and you're doing that with the phase, they're at greater risk as seasons progress and as the fall approaches. We need them to stretch, to be in physical condition, and have that opportunity, both for their mental and physical. So I appreciate the balanced approach, and I appreciate the safeties first. And as I stated in an earlier presentation, I hope we can return to normalcy as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And you're right. We really try to take a 3D approach to athletics in the district, which is basically treating the athlete physically, mentally, and emotionally. I would agree that at this time, a lot of our kids feel pinned up. There's definitely some pinned up emotion with that as well. So we definitely want to give them a chance to have an outlet to return to athletics. We need to control that environment.
Board members, any additional questions? Please continue, Mr. McDowell.
That is all the information I have at this time, Dr. Santa Cruz. So.
Okay.
Santa Cruz?
Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
Yes, I just wanted to agree with Mr. Carr as far as, and also Mr. McDowell in doing what we can to provide these opportunities for athletes in a safe way. I think I like that we are taking proactive approach to making sure that they're across the planet. I mean, otherwise they're probably going to go to other places as well. I think it's incumbent on us to have them in a safe way start working out, you know, so that I think that's the best possible solution that we can provide at this point. So
I'd like to add something if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Dr. McCord.
Thank you, sir. We will be meeting with the coaches on WebEx in the next couple days, outlining all of this information, as well as letting them know that we are going to be looking after this. This isn't just turn you loose and go. We are going to keep and monitor this, and they will know if as the leaders of their groups, that if they're not following those certain things, that we will shut it down right away until they can realize that this is what's most important and what's best for kids. And so I will be on that WebEx as well as Mr. McIntosh to just reiterate some of these points, to let them know that safety comes first and we're not going to be looking in a different direction.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. And I would like to reiterate and appreciate the work that you have done on these three presentations, you and your team. As we look at the athletic end of it, there are two sides to that coin, and one has to do with the health and safety of students as it relates to COVID-19, but the other side is also health and safety because it relates to conditioning, both physical and mental conditioning, for students to be able to compete at a point when we're ready to do that. So we're really caught right in the middle. And so appreciation to all of the groups for consideration of as many of the parameters and ramifications that are potentials and potential pitfalls as we move through this. And Dr. McCord, my compliments to you and your teams.
Dr. Santa Cruz, I'd like to tag on to what you just said, if that's okay. You know, this is unprecedented times, and we've not seen anything like this before. And I just want to say to Dr. McCord, in the three presentations, I feel better than I did earlier today, even though I read them through. And I really appreciate all the thought that has gone into them and the safety of not just our children, but our staff. And I think what Dr. Santa Cruz just said, you know, there's two sides to this. We have to look at all kind of, there's more than two sides, but we have to look at all of them. So I too appreciate all that you've done and your attention to detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
That I would just like to say these three presentations, as well as a plethora of other people, they're the ones that are making this work. They're the ones that are putting their heads together. Steve's listening to the coaches, Jared's listening to the parents, and Barbara's listening to the needs of our district. And it's really amazing to see how they work through this process. And I'm just very proud of them. So thank you guys for recognizing the talent that we have in this district.
Thanks, Dr. McCord. We'll now move to item 6, unless there is any additional information, Dr. McCord. No? Item 6 is the consent agenda. And if I could, before asking for a motion, there is an issue with item 6.03 that once the motion is made, I would like for us to consider so that we can avoid a potential conflict of interest and allow all board members to vote where possible and necessary, and one board member to abstain where necessary. So we look at the consent agenda, item 6. If we can understand that 6.03 will need some attention. So is there a motion?
Dr. Santa Cruz, I move that we remove item 6.03 and approve the remainder of the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Is there a second?
Second.
I will second that motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, then we will move through the consent agenda item, and we have a motion before us. Items 6.01 through 6.014, excluding 6.03. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Ms. Wilson, would you please poll the board?
Ms. Lori Wood. Mr. Reed Carr.
Aye.
Ms. Sheila Ujedi.
Aye.
Ms. Jill Humphries.
Aye.
Dr. Charles Santa Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 5 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Now we will need a motion to entertain item 6.03, and I would like to request that we remove one name from item 6.03 so that Ms. Humphries can vote on this item. And I would request the removal of the name Laura Humphries from item 6.03, and we will entertain that individual separately. Is there a motion?
Dr. Santa Cruz, I move that we approve item 6.03 with the exception of Laura Humphries for a separate vote.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ujedi. Item 6.03 is before you. Is there any discussion? And we will vote on item 6.03 with the pertinent exclusion. Ms. Wilson, please poll the board. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Ms. Wilson?
Ms. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Carr.
Aye.
Ms. Ujedi.
Aye.
Dr. Santa Cruz.
Aye.
Dr. Santa Cruz, you have 4 ayes.
I also need to vote on that one. Aye.
Ms. Humphries can vote on that one.
Yes.
Ms. Humphries.
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 5 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Now we have a
Dr. Santa Cruz, before you
Yes.
move on, I just want to recuse myself. So I'm going to turn off my mic because this would be a conflict of interest for me. So I'm recusing myself and I will not be voting.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. All those in favor of item 6.03 with the inclusion of Laura Humphries, I am entertaining a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ujedi. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. And Ms. Wilson, please poll the board.
Ms. Lori Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Reed Carr. Ms. Sheila Ujedi. Dr. Charles Santa Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 4 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. There was a request of me earlier that should we go to 8 o'clock, that we take a 5-minute recess just for personal business. So I am requesting that we recess for 5 minutes. Those items still are included on the newest and most recent version of the document. So item 7.01, Dr. McCord, do you have anything by way of introduction there?
Dr. Santa Cruz, I really don't have an introduction. This is kind of a, we talked about this at our last board meeting / work study, and I think you have a thought or idea about how to proceed with this.
Thank you. And I just mentioned that in my introduction. So item 7.01, we're ready to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Uggetti. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? So the motion inclusive then, saying no discussion, is that we would submit our request to ASBA that they consider our support for the recommendation for the 2021 legislative agenda.
Excuse me, Dr. Santa Cruz. I did have a couple of things I wanted to discuss on the legislative agenda. Sorry.
Yes.
So
Go right ahead.
okay, so I did look at the past year's priorities, and there were a couple that I wanted to either add in or change out some of that we previously had. I wanted to put as a priority repeal programs that give public funds to private schools and sorry, I don't have the complete wording of that one, but it's prevent those programs from expanding. I'd have to look at the agenda. I'm not sure which one that is. And also to reform current funding to assist and to provide districts with the appropriate and adequate funding that they need.
Okay.
Let's see. I didn't put the topic that they're under. I believe they're both under the first agenda item. And then I had two additional items that I thought we would want to consider. I know there was some discussion in the current legislative session about including the board discussion of security issues as a reason for executive session. I'm not sure where that bill ended up, whether it passed before the legislature had to adjourn early. There were many bills that didn't quite make it through the whole process. So I wanted to make sure that if that did not pass, that we continue to work towards that. And then the other item for additional consideration was no cuts to public education. I realize that the state budget is going to be very challenging. We are getting additional funds from the federal government, both for our district and for the state. And I think they need to look for additional revenue by evaluating tax cuts and tax loopholes of the past that they have granted. My understanding, there's $14 billion of those sorts of things, and that's much more than the state budget. So considering that we're going to have additional needs in our schools, I think it's critical that we push hard not to have cuts to our education, since they haven't returned the cuts of 10 years ago.
Would that be an amendment to the motion? Because the motion was to submit and accept last year's as our recommendation for this year.
Well, I guess that would be an amendment to the motion, because I think there are additional things that we need to consider.
Okay.
Can you repeat?
Go ahead. Is that Ms. Uggetti?
I just wanted to know if Mrs. Humphries could repeat them again, please.
Oh, certainly. Sorry, I sent Gabby an email and I tried to print it off, but I only got half of my wording. I don't know what went wrong with my printer. So the The ones that I was considering as priority were repeal programs that give public funds to private schools and prevent further expansion of those programs. I'm trying to find it. It's on the current legislative agenda. I'm just not sure where it is. Also to require public accountability for taxpayer dollars spent on education, which is the second one. Repeal any program that gives public funds for private schools, vouchers, parentheses, empowerment scholarship accounts, and private school subsidies, student tuition organizations, and prevent any future expansion. So that was one I wanted us to consider as a priority. And then the other one was under adequately and equitably fund school districts. And that would be, reform current year funding to a system that provides districts with stable annual budgeting ability and technical reliability. So those were two priorities I wanted us to consider. And then the two additional items for consideration are to use executive session for board discussion of security issues, planning, and costs. That was I guess there are other districts that have also suggested that to the legislature, and that was being considered in the bill this year. I'm not sure that bill made it completely through the legislature before the abrupt end of the legislature due to the COVID-19 crisis. And then my second one was, it's not on the current legislative agenda, but pushing for no cuts to public education, looking for additional revenue by evaluating tax loopholes and tax revenues to find sustainable funding.
Mrs. Humphries,
Yes.
am I incorrect in, was there not a law or initiative passed that did prevent the private school expansion?
There was a Prop 305 that passed, which defeated a bill that the legislature had passed in 2017 that allowed a universal expansion and limited it to 30,000 students.
Right.
It was not a permanent ban. There was an initiative where they were gathering signatures that has been stopped because of the COVID-19 crisis. The legislature this year has passed a slight expansion in allowing students on Indian reservations to attend out-of-state private schools. So we are actually sending our Arizona taxpayer dollars to out-of-state private schools in some circumstances. It was very limited right now, but as we've seen, some of these programs continue to grow.
Board members, what is your pleasure? There is an amendment to the motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second if we can discuss it.
Okay, we have been moved and seconded. That's an amendment, and yes, there is open for discussion. Just as a matter of information, it's been my experience as I've worked with this legislative council the last 2 or 3 times is that you have major headings and then you have sub-points, bullet points. What Ms. Humphries is talking about, I liken to bullet points under any of those major headings, and they would then be included. That's what the document is that requests district priorities. And she is, I think, requesting that, should the motion pass, that the 3 items that she's mentioned become the Gilbert district priorities along with the current legislative agenda. Am I correct there, Ms. Humphries?
You are close. So the first 2 points I gave are already part of the political agenda. I'm putting there as something we really want to emphasize. And then the last 2 points on the executive session bill and the no cuts to public education, those are new considerations.
Okay, so those would be two new ones from your point of view.
Yes, that would be too new.
Okay, it's open for discussion. Ms. Wood, you had a
Can
comment.
I just clarify, Dr. Santa Cruz, the only two things that we would be asking are the executive session for security and no cut.
Yes. Yes, that is correct.
All right.
Okay, Ms. Wood? Ms. Wood, did you have some comments?
Yes, please. Can you hear me, Dr. Cruz?
Yeah, go ahead.
So are we going to change and not then have last year's priorities listed at all? Or were we going to scratch a couple of those? Or are we just going to add Ms. Humphreys, all of her points to last year's as well?
Well, we're entitled to 5 plus two new ones. What I hear Ms. Humphrey saying is, perhaps I'm incorrect here, but the 5 that we submitted would go in, and then the two that she's just mentioned would occupy the new priority spaces.
So I think I don't remember exactly what we submitted last year. I think that's just a suggestion of 5. I'm not sure we could submit 7 if you prefer, or we could just cross a couple off that are maybe not as important to us if we would prefer to the 2 that I have suggested as priorities.
You have an opportunity to write 7 items. 5 are already there. 2 could be added as new, as I understand it.
So we would need to cross off 2 of them, the top 5 priorities, and then probably the additional items, cross those off as well, Ms. Humphreys, and put your 2 new ones in.
That was my suggestion, but it's up to all of us as a board.
Okay. I guess last year's top 5 priorities, the first one was fully fund full-day kindergarten and include kindergarten students. I probably would like to include that one. Change override budget, increase language to better reflect. Maybe since we're not in a override or budget increase year this year, maybe that's when we could replace with one of yours that you suggested.
That would work for me.
Okay, allow school districts greater flexibility. Let's see. Sorry, I'm Dr. Santa Cruz, do you have that whole? Oh, here we go. Allow school districts greater flexibility in the divestiture or use of taxpayer-funded assets. I'd probably like to keep that one. The next one is support policy that recognizes and respects teaching as a profession. Probably important too. The 5th one was state standardized testing shall not be used for any purpose other than student growth in the testing subject. So I don't know, Ms. Humphreys, what other one would you prefer or would you suggest?
Well, I have to say all of them are priorities to me, but I really think it's important. Can you read the last 2 again? I don't have that paper in front of me.
Support policy that recognizes and respects teaching as a profession. And then state standardized testing shall not be used for any purpose other than to measure student growth in the testing subject.
I hate to take out the one that says support recognition of teaching as a profession and respect for that. I think that should be a given on the part of the state legislature, but unfortunately in our state it is not always that way. But that might be one I could suggest.
May I suggest that we might be able to modify the fully funding the kindergarten to fully fund all kindergarten and the school formula, which would in essence capture your thoughts of don't cut the school. We're just saying it is fully funded. If you fully fund the formula, you're not cutting funding.
That's true. That was an additional item on the 2 additional items for consideration last night. It wasn't necessarily one of the top 5 priorities.
I'm just trying to find a way to get it into.
I understand. I appreciate that.
I prefer that wording as well.
The wording for
what Mr. Carr just said. I would prefer that as an item.
Okay, we can do that then.
I do like your suggestion for the executive sessions to include security items or matters of security. I think that's important.
It is very important. They have been working on that. I suggested it to a couple of legislators. I believe the Madison School District brought it forward and they've been working on it, but I was not aware that had passed this session, but it still really impacts us.
I would like to put that as an additional item for consideration. And maybe we have additional items right now. We have additional funding for all staff and raise amount of capital to cover the true needs of district. Should we just, which of those do you think?
Well, we've had the governor's 20 by 2020. So I think we've accomplished some of that. We still have to work going forward. There is also the capital funding lawsuit that the ASBA is doing to press the state legislature into funding schools in the way that both the Constitution requires and the Bishop v. Roosevelt lawsuit requires.
Maybe we don't need the raise amount of capital to cover the true needs of district because you feel like that's already being taken care of?
Well, I think the lawsuit is covering that issue, so yes.
Put that for your additional. So scratch number 2 and put the executive sessions.
Okay. And Gabby has the wording on that when I send it to her in email, so she can just use the wording that I've already given her.
Okay. So so in the top, we still just, so we changed one of them. We eliminated number 2, change override budget increase language and put your other one in. And then you said maybe support policy that recognizes and respects teaching.
I hate to remove that one, but I think overall that's just something that should be given. But we definitely, I think that we need to push for repeal of programs that give public funds to private schools. That's especially since that expansion was passed this year and signed into law by the governor. We are the only state sending our taxpayer dollars to out-of-state private schools under that new legislation.
Any additional discussion? I understand things here, and I would like, because I've lost track here, I would like for Mrs. Humphreys to submit the language that she believes ought to happen there to Ms. Wilson so that she can include it on the form. Mr. Carr had some suggestions for one of the items on wordsmithing the language on it. If he could submit that, then we can vote on this amendment.
Mrs. Wilson has my language already, so I don't think that's a problem.
Okay.
Dr. Santa Cruz,
table it? Yes, Ms. Wood?
Should we table this motion until we can do that, or should we?
The document is due on the 29th.
Okay.
If we don't submit it, we obviously have relinquished our voice there. Okay. So the reason for this and the advance notice on giving us all the documents long ago was to try to expedite that and get our say into the Legislative Council. All of the items on the legislative agenda will be reaffirmed by the Legislative Council of ASBA, and that is what the lobbyists at ASBA will use to guide its work during the legislative session, during the next legislative session. So they're simply asking for suggestions from districts, and if we have some strong opinions about any particular item, that is what this exercise is about. But if we don't submit by Friday, then we have lost our opportunity.
Okay. Well, I would be okay with what we discussed. So number 1, fully fund full day kindergarten and include kindergarten students. Wait, and Reed, and you said and fully fund the formula. However you said that, Mr. Carr.
And I don't know that exact language, but if we just combine those two, fully fund all day kindergarten and fully fund K through 12 to the statutory formula.
Okay. And then number 2 would be reform current year funding to a system that provides districts with appropriate stable annual budgeting ability and technical reliability. That's what Ms. Humphrey suggested. Number 3 is from last year. Our priority allows school districts greater flexibility. It's a little bit more about that. Number 4, repeal programs. Let me see where this one is here. Repeal any program that gives public funds for private schools vouchers, just like she had mentioned, private school subsidies, and prevent future expansion. Then number 5, state standardized testing shall not be used for any purpose other than to measure student growth in the testing subject. And then the additional items for consideration, additional funding for all staff, and then second, the executive session for the security and other things like that, which she has sent the wording to Gabby. So I guess that would, is that okay with you?
That was a good summary. Thank you.
All right. Everyone have a clear understanding of the amendment. We'll vote on it first, and then we'll vote on the primary. All right. All those in favor of the amendment as submitted and written, and Ms. Woods, if you would just be so kind as to get with Ms. Wilson tomorrow and make sure that we have everything that we need, that would be appreciated, and we will take a vote. Ms. Wilson, would you please poll the board on the amendment? Ms. Wilson?
Ms. Wilson, you're muted.
You keep muting yourself.
There you go.
Ms. Wood?
Aye.
Mr. Carr?
Aye.
Ms. Ujedi?
Aye.
Ms. Humphries?
Aye.
Dr. Santa Cruz?
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 5 ayes.
Thank you. The amendment passes. We'll now vote on the original motion, and that was to submit our previous year's legislative agenda item. And now these modifications will go with that. So all those in favor of the primary motion, please signify by saying aye. Ms. Wilson, please poll the board. I think you're muted again.
Still muted.
Ms. Wood?
Aye.
Mr. Carr?
Aye.
Ms. Ujedi?
Aye.
Ms. Humphries?
Aye.
Dr. Santa Cruz?
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 5 ayes.
Okay, the main motion and the amendment both pass. We will move on and submit that document by Friday of this week. Ms. Wood will get with you, Ms. Wilson, and make sure that we have appropriate language to submit. We'll now move to 7.02, and that is the approval of start times for board meetings for 2020, 2021. Dr. McCord.
Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members, I think back in January, everybody can remember that far back, we discussed start times and dates for our board meeting. There were certain suggestions, and what Ms. Wilson has put together is a list of times for work study, policy meeting, as well as board business meetings for the next school year starting 2020. And I believe you have those in front of you. I would like to point out one of these dates for our work study for November 3rd at 6:30. That is election night. And so we might want to move that to the day before or to the next week on a Tuesday. But other than that, that is kind of how we've been operating. And if you'd like to continue that, great. But this is the discussion for action.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. So you have the explanation for item 7.02 before you. Is there a motion?
Dr. Santa Cruz, I move that we approve the meeting schedule as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
Go ahead, Sheila.
Dr. Santa Cruz, I think I'm the one that brought this up in January. And it was basically having to do with the fact that our administrators work so many long hours. And, sometimes our meetings go pretty late and they still have to be at work the next morning. And I wish I don't remember what, at the time I looked at some of the other districts and they were starting earlier. And I know that Mrs. Humphries had a commitment through ASBA. That's why we postponed it to having this discussion. But I still think it would be a benefit to everybody if we could start a little bit earlier. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Uggetti. Any additional commentary?
I wanted to ask Mr. Carr, when this was discussed in January, he wanted to move the policy meeting to a different time. Mr. Carr, is that still your desire?
I want to be very respectful of the time commitments and timing of the staff who attends those. But if we could do it more over the lunch hour, that would be a great benefit to me in planning my workday.
Dr. Santa Cruz, I have a couple of suggestions. In my view, I do understand that our educators work long hours, and I understand that we don't want to make our meetings too long to keep them out late at night, but I feel that it's really important that hopefully in the future, that our board meetings can be attended by and viewed by our students and our families. I think that's a really critical issue, and I would say that for a lot of people, any earlier than 6:30 would be a challenge because of after school activities, extracurricular, sports practices. I would like, while we cannot meet in person, I would like to leave the time of 6:30 available so that when we can come together and celebrate our school successes, that as many people can attend as possible. So I would prefer to see the meeting time stay at 6:30. As far as the policy meeting, my commitments that I had never came to fruition because of the COVID-19 challenges. But if there is a better time for Mr. Carr, I can support that. Also, the past few elections, we have moved the date of our board meeting to the Wednesday night so that people have the opportunity to go and vote up until the polls close. And this is a presidential election. There'll probably be plenty of vote by mail, but there may be long lines at the polls. And so I would prefer we move our meeting to Wednesday, November 4th on that particular date. And so those are my thoughts. I would like to hear what others think.
Dr. Santa Cruz?
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I would agree with Ms. Santa Cruz. I want to be respectful of our district staff and others who stay late, but I also want to make sure that our parents, our families, community members know that they are welcome and that we want them to be present at these meetings if they want to be present, or at least watch them if they can. I don't know, maybe we could move it to 6 p.m. That might be a kind of a balance of a little bit earlier, but still after work hours, or at least you could make arrangements to get things done and get back to a meeting if you're a community member, but maybe that would make it a little earlier so that our staff could get home. And then I'm in favor of the other two things. If we could move policy meeting to 11, 12, 12:30, whatever would work best for the staff and for Mr. Carr, I would make that work. And I'm in favor of moving that meeting to November 4th if that works for everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Mr. Carr, deferring to you as we look at the policy meetings, particularly 11 to 1. Is that a better time for you? 12 to 1. Is that?
Again, I don't necessarily want to dictate the time if it would inconvenience all of the principals and staff, but 11 would be a great advantage to me, or 11:30 would be a great advantage to me, because I can then just take it as my lunch hour and be more respectful of my business partners and clients' schedules. So if we could make that accommodation, I will gratefully accept whatever accommodation we're able to make.
Okay. All right. I'm hearing some consensus regarding probably an 11:30 start time on policy meeting. I had heard 6 o'clock meetings and work study sessions, or 6:30 for board meetings and work study sessions. The motion does not include those specifics. It includes the times accepted as printed.
Dr. Santa.
Yes.
I absolutely could live with the 6 o'clock time, and I think it would be respectful to our administrators and to our community, be able to participate as they should.
Okay. So,
Dr. Stevens,
go ahead.
I will happily amend my motion to state the dates presented with times being adjusted for the work study and board meetings to 6 p.m. and policy meeting to 11:30 a.m. start.
And what about November 3rd?
And further amendment to change the date of November 3rd to November 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Mr. Carr is making an amendment or a change to his motion. Is the second accepting of the change?
I don't remember who seconded.
I think it was Ms. Uggetti.
Ms. Wood, I wanted to ask Ms. Wood a question before I just wanted to ask someone who has had children on a sports team who practice after school, what time is it that your student is usually done with his practice and could get to a meeting? You know, if this football team were going to be recognized, could he get to a meeting at 6 o'clock? That's my question.
Well, 6 o'clock would probably be about the earliest, but typically we recognize them off season. Anyways, we recognize them after their season has ended. And so unless they're in another sport.
Well, I was thinking mostly of students who might have things after school who would like to be at the board meeting or who are being recognized, even though I'm just wondering if students can get there at 6 o'clock. I'm thinking that students might need a 6:30 time so that they can be there. Whether I realize that, you know, some students may not have a commitment, but others might. And I just was trying to understand what the students might need.
Well, I think typically, I don't think there's that big of a difference between 6 or 6:30 for the athletes. And I think if we made a special request, hopefully their coaches would, you know, would honor that night as well. So.
All right, then. Thank you.
Any additional discussion?
I believe we need to hear whether Mrs. Uggetti will second the motion that.
I will second it.
Okay, so we have, and you'll have to help me with this, Dr. McCord, we have change in times of our meetings. Our policy meetings will begin at 11:30. Our board meetings and work studies 6. And for this next cycle, the November meeting will be moved to November 4th.
Yes.
That is correct.
Is that correct? Okay. So the motion is before you. We will now vote. Ms. Wilson, if you will poll the board, those in favor, please signify.
Aye.
Carr?
Aye.
Ms. Sheila Uggetti?
Aye.
Jill Humphreys?
Aye.
Mr. Santa Cruz?
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 5 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Now move to item 7.03. And it is approval of renovation of Val Vista Lakes parking lot. Dr. McCord.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz. Governing board members. Before that, we ask for your approval of the renovation of Val Vista Lakes parking lot. This is something that Ms. Betts and Mr. Dutchover will chat to you about. This is Val Vista Lakes is scheduled to have their parking lot redone. And in addition, due to not just the safety, but just the overall traffic flow, buses and drop off and pick up from parents, it's an opportunity to make that construction right in terms of improving the flow of that traffic. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Betts.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. Before we do that, we have item 7.03 in front of us. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Humphreys. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we will hear Mr. Dutchover and Ms. Betts, and then we will have our discussion.
Good evening again, governing board members. I'll just summarize the project, and if there's any details that you need to have answered, Mr. Dutchover is here as well. So if you recall, Val Vista Lake was up for having their parking lot totally torn up and redone a year ago. At that point in time, I had been told by numerous people that the traffic patterns associated with bus traffic as well as parent drop-off and pickup traffic at Val Vista Lakes was the worst in the school district and needed to be addressed. So at that point in time, I asked Albert if we could delay this project until this summer so that we were able to come up with an appropriate solution to not only take care of the parking lot, but also to improve the traffic patterns and to improve the separation between bus traffic and parent drop. So at this point in time, we were able to do that. We did come up with several solutions on doing that. And we arrived at this particular solution, which is adding a bus lane to the, I think it's to the east, totally east of the property. Is that right, Albert? The east of the parking lot?
It's the northeast portion of the parking lot, yes.
Northeast portion of the parking lot. So if you have any other additional specific questions regarding this project, Albert and I are prepared to answer any other questions.
Board members, what's your pleasure regarding the proposal?
Dr. Sanders, if I can just make one comment.
Go ahead.
To summarize a discussion that I had with Ms. Betts earlier on this issue. This project, because of where it's located, actually does qualify or would be allowable to be for us to use adjacent ways funds. In order to do that, this board would have to impose or create a tax for the adjacent ways. And as I discussed with her, and to clarify, I wanted to make sure that we weren't considering that when I discussed that with her. And just recall that when the bond that we're using was given to the voters, we included these types of projects on the materials. Now, 2 of you were on that board, and the other 3 of us were involved with that presentation of that bond prior to the time that we were on this board. And as a whole, I think all 5 of us in official or unofficial capacities made representations to the community that we would not raise taxes beyond that, and that we would use these bond funds for this type of project. So I was grateful that the administration, who weren't here at that time, was proposing to use the bonds. And I just want to highlight to our community that we are staying true to what was represented to the voters when they approved these bonds, and again, thank them for entrusting us. And hopefully that the fact that we could be using adjacent ways and not is a further sign of fulfilling that public trust by this board.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Appreciate those comments. Ms. Betts, Mr. Dutchover, anything else?
Dr. Santa Cruz, I had a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Humphreys.
Ms. Betts, one of the questions I have, because Val Vista Lakes is an older elementary school, has the best practice for what should be the traffic pattern changed over the years? And so now we are separating buses from vehicles.
So could you ask that again? I'm not quite sure I followed. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. My question is, Val Vista Lakes has a certain traffic pattern that was, I don't know how old the school is, 20 years old, 30 years old.
Okay.
At that time, that traffic pattern was considered acceptable. Now, do we have a better practice where we're separating car traffic from bus traffic? And, that's been a change over the years that we now want to go forward and incorporate in the structure of the school parking lot.
So Albert, help me out here if I'm incorrect, but please know that Val Vista Lakes, upon first being built, was intended to be primarily a walk to school, so not have a great deal of bus traffic. The DPS regulations regarding the separation of bus traffic and parent drop-off traffic has been in existence for quite some time. So it's just the fact that now, with the special education student growth and then the growth of students in general, has led to more bus traffic going into Val Vista Lakes. And it has been a problem for many, many years, not just the last few.
All right, I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Humphreys. Any additional comments?
Yes, Dr. Santa Cruz, if I could.
Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
I think also, Ms. Betts, if I could add to that, I think there's more parent pickup and drop off traffic than we had anticipated, as well as different needs have come up and parents drive their kids differently than they used to, or just are at different places. So, but also I just wanted to comment on, so basically the parking lot needs to be redone. At this point, we're going to spend money, bond money. That's what it's for, to redo it so that we can maintain our parking lot. And I appreciate that you, rather than going forward and redoing the parking lot last year and then in a subsequent time, you know, coming back and then having more additions to that, I'm glad that we have actually pulled back. I think that's the most efficient way to use our money, that we have combined these projects together. So my question was, if we were to just redo the parking lot, refinish it, and not put this additional bus lane in there, how much money would you expect that to be?
So Albert, can you help me out with that particular question?
Just off the top of my head, I believe we are under 200,000 for that project to maintain the parking lot, remilling and resurfacing of the current lot as it stands.
So it's a pretty significant in addition to that.
Yes, because we're going to add another that lane or another portion of asphalt parking spaces, as well as some other infrastructure to the parking lot.
Okay. Also, when would you expect this to be finished by?
We're looking to have this done, if we start as soon as possible, somewhere around mid July, right before school starts. To be totally honest, it's going to be similar to what we did at Greenfield as far as timeline is concerned. So we're gonna press the envelope there, but I have confidence that we could get it done again.
Thank you.
Mr. Dutchover, I have one question. How many additional parking spaces will we add? Because that is also a challenge at Val Vista Lakes. There's just, when people come out for school events, or even without school events, there's usually a lot of parking right outside the school. On the street.
I believe we'll be roughly at around 20 plus. So I mean, 20 to 22. We've played around with a few variations, but definitely 20 spots in addition to what they currently have.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dutchover, Ms. Betts, I appreciate the thought that's gone into this renovation, particularly as it relates to commingling of bus traffic and parent traffic and the safety of all concerned. I think that's my paramount interest, is using dollars effectively for safety of all concerned, particularly our students, but also the efficiency of the time use that our buses have to be there, arrive, and depart to get to their next run. So I think this was a move to put it off for 1 year, and I think the plans, at least as I observed them, look to be acceptable to me, at least. Board members, any additional commentary? Hearing none, then we have item 7.3 in front of us. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say nay. Ms. Wilson, please poll the board.
Aye.
Mr. Reed Carr,
Aye.
Ms. Sheila Ujedi,
Aye.
Ms. Jill Humphries,
Aye.
Dr. Charles Santa Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 5 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Motion carries, and we'll move to item 7.04, adoption of resolution authorizing the issuance of sale of school improvement bonds. Dr. McCord.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz. Governing board members, this evening we're asking your approval to adopt the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of school improvement bonds. We have representatives from Gus Roosevelt here tonight. And I will let Bonnie, as soon as you make a motion on this, introduce the item.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. Do you have for you item 7.04? Please issue a motion.
I move we adopt the resolution authorizing the issue and sale of school improvement bonds.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Uggetti. Ms. Betts, if you will proceed with your presentation, and we'll leave it open for commentary and discussion when you are done.
Great. So I am going to hand the presentation over to Megan Burke and Bill Davis from Piper Sandler. They are our financial advisors, and they will give you the high-level information regarding this bond sale. In addition, I wanted to let you know that our bond counsel is here, Mr. James Giel from Gus Rosenfeld. So he's here to answer any questions you might have about the process and the legalities associated with it. So if it's okay, Megan, I will drive for you, and I will share my screen here.
Great, thanks, Bonnie.
See. Nope, wrong one. Okay, there we go. So Megan, just tell me when you need me to move the screen for you.
Okay, great, thanks. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the governing board, Dr. McCord. Thank you for the opportunity to be. If you can go to the next slide. We have before you this evening. Worth of Bonnie, you go to the next.
Okay. I can.
Thank you.
Yep. So Megan, you're fading. Megan, you're fading in and out.
So the $40 million will be made up of $8 million from your 2015 authorization, as well as. Bill, maybe do you want to jump in?
I'll be happy to.
Now? Sorry.
Good evening, everyone. That's better. That's better, Megan.
Okay.
Want to try?
Thanks.
Yeah, it's still cutting out though.
Sorry.
Megan, should I just try? Bonnie, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you okay, Bill. Yeah.
Okay, well, let me try. So apologies there, but the bandwidth or something I think is interfering with Megan's audio. So as Megan was saying on this slide, the $40 million project fund deposit is going to be comprised of $8 million for technology from the 2015 and voter authorization. That's the final $8 million, plus $32 million from the 2019 authorization. And that's what's kind of depicted down there at the bottom of that slide. So you'll see that there'll be no 2015 authorization remaining following this sale. And out of the 100 million, we'll be selling or utilizing 32, and there'll be 68 million remaining from the, or for the 2019 authorization. Just real quickly, then we can jump to the next slide. This is just kind of, market interest rates. Rates are really, really low, as everybody knows. There was a little, dislocation in the municipal market 4 to 6 weeks ago. Rates spiked up. You can kind of see that, but they've come back down. And, the forecast as we head into June and July is for, continued low interest rates. So it's a very volatile market, but we're going to keep a close eye on it as we move forward, should you approve the resolution tonight. The next slide. And again, if you have any questions, please, stop them and we can address them as we go through here too. So this is the preliminary financing timetable. There's a lot of detail on here. There's a lot of work that, will be getting done over the course of the next, 4 to 6 weeks. Document preparation, Gus Rosenfeld, the official statement, the offering document, credit rating presentations, just, everything that it takes to kind of get the bond issue ready for sale. And again, this looks to a pricing in the, middle towards the end of July, which would mean proceeds at the county treasurer, bond proceeds for the district at the county treasurer by early to mid-August at the latest. Let me see, I think the last couple slides are just the distribution list. You can kind of just see the names of the primary, participants in the financing process. Again, the method of sale, we're still kind of working on that, and you can see as Bonnie's scrolling down, the underwriters have yet to be determined, but we're anticipating that we'll be sending out an RFP, request for proposals for underwriter services, in the coming weeks. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. Bonnie, was there anything else that you wanted me to touch on, or?
No, just if the board has any questions for either Megan or for James Gill, that would be great.
Board members, any additional questions or commentary? My comment is a thank you to Ms. Betts for her communication with each of us individually regarding this proposal for bond sale. Her explanation was very well done, and Bill and Megan, this just simply serves to support some of the things that Bonnie had already mentioned to us. So I'll leave it there and open it up to board members for any additional commentary or question. Board members?
Dr. Santa Cruz?
Go ahead, Lori.
I could ask either Bonnie or Mr. Davis, can you explain what the benefit is to sell the bonds at this time? Why we're kind of having the timing and feels like we're pushing through the next couple of weeks to get this all done. How would that benefit our district or our taxpayers?
Please, Bill, go right ahead and answer that.
All right, I'll jump in. So I think there's a couple primary issues that are being considered relative to the timing. One of them, and one of the most important ones, is the district's need for the money. So we can get the proceeds into your account at the treasurer's office that you can use them for various projects that you need and that were promised to the voters. The other is, the market conditions at this point in time. Interest rates are so low right now that, we're anticipating an interest rate that is probably going to be below 2%. And that over time is going to save, district property taxpayers, just a lot of money versus what we had projected and anticipated just, less than 6 months, 9 months ago.
Thank you.
Board members?
And then Dr. Santa Cruz, I do have a couple of slides that provide information to the board on how we plan on spending the $40 million. So if there's no questions regarding the actual sale and the financing, I can move into that second part of the presentation.
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Humphries.
Okay, so one of the questions I had was, when does the authorization for the 2015 bond expire? When would that end?
Bonnie, do you want me to address that?
Yeah, go ahead. I believe it's 10 years, so 2025, but yeah, Bill, go right ahead.
Yeah, no, that is accurate. If you haven't sold the final bonds within, and Megan, correct me here too, but as Bonnie mentioned, within 10 years from the election,
That's correct.
then it would just evaporate, if you will, and go away unused.
Okay, all right. So I do want to thank you for pointing out how this saves the taxpayer money. And I wanted to ask another question, because this is an unprecedented time, and should the interest rate go up unexpectedly, because we know day to day things are very unexpected in our world right now. Should the interest rate go up, we would just wait a little while to sell those bonds until we got a better interest rate, correct?
More than likely away, and then postpone, for a longer period of time, the balance. So there's a couple options that are available. And this, this resolution, as you've all read too, is a not to exceed resolution. So you have the ability of selling something less than the 40 million.
All right, thank you for that answer.
Additional commentary or questions, board members? If not, Ms. Betts, move on.
Okay, terrific. So the question is, how do we plan on spending this next $40 million, and how will it be allocated out over the next few years? So just wanted to share that in fiscal year 2015, these were the original annual bond spending estimates. So please note technology, the 2020, initially we were expected to spend $3.3 million in 2023 and $3.3 million in 2024. As you know, the time frame for all of the spend has been accelerated over the last couple of years, simply based upon our needs. So of the total dollar amount that's available, of the $8 million from the 2015, about $6.6 million would be going to technology, and about $1.4 million to facility maintenance and renewal. Those dollar amounts you can see are in the red font on this slide. Then moving into 2019, the bond authorization, and this is directly out of the pamphlet, as well as the information that we shared in our presentation. So the large categories were security camera systems and other security components, a total of $10 million. Performing arts, athletic venue upgrades and additions, $5.6 million. Technology, infrastructure, and equipment, just under $20 million. The majority of the $100 million authorization would be going to facility reinvestment, about $61 million. And finally, a small allocation, $4 million to student transportation vehicles and equipment. That's expected out of the total $100 million. If you look to the left then under fiscal year 2021 and 2022, you can see that those total, along with the $8 million from the 2015 authorization, the 9 million plus the 22 plus the 8 equates to the $40 million. And so we plan on spending about $5.5 million on the security cameras and infrastructure projects. And then again, about $2.2 million of this new authorization for technology in 2022, the other $6 million coming from the 2015 authorization. And of course, these are all estimates. So as new information comes to light and we lose a component of one of our buildings or whatever, then some of those priorities would change. But these high level categories are pretty close to being accurate. So I wanted to just share that. And then some of the details, the security spend about 7.7 million, front office security upgrades comparable to what we did at Mesquite High, fencing and door hardware, and then camera systems, the $1 million. And then technology, various device refreshes, which has proven to be something that we were very fortunate to have given the uncertain times and having to do remote learning and potentially offer a bricks and mortar online learning environment, at least at the beginning of next year. Some hybrid of the two have given us more flexibility than many other school districts have. And then of course, ongoing wire upgrades, data center and server refreshes, and then also disaster recovery capacity and backup systems. So that's how the dollars would be spent specifically on security and technology. And then the next slide gives you some ideas of what the facility reinvestment might look like. You can see we just completed restroom remodels at Highland High and at Mesquite High. So these restroom remodels are needed at Ridge, Gilbert High, and then Mesquite Junior. Also for the elementary schools, you can see listed there. Flooring again, this would be tiling as well as carpeting at Desert Ridge High, GCA, Highland High, Gilbert High, Highland Junior, and Mesquite Junior. Again, some comparable projects at the elementaries. And then you can see the other categories that I won't go into, but again, all of these will be vetted with you and prioritized once the bond proceeds are received when we close on this bond sale. So with that, I don't have anything else further unless any of you have any additional questions or concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Betts. Board members, any additional questions or concerns?
Dr. Santa Cruz, just one question.
Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
Ms. Betts, I know that when we sell bonds and when we put out the pamphlet and our voters vote on it, we have specific allocations that we have to abide by, which you've shown. But the timing of it, that is not something that we can estimate it, but it's not something that we are legally bound to in the same way as the allocations of the money. Is that correct?
That's correct. What we've made commitments to are on tax rate and the maximum dollar amount, the maximum interest amount per each of the bond coupons. So Bill and/or Megan, are there any other things that we're committed to on the pamphlet that we are obligated to meet?
No, Bonnie, that pretty much covers it. I mean, in addition to, the general project definitions, parameters that were in the ballot. So that's right.
So we would still be we would absolutely be within our commitments when we sold this bond in 2015 and 2019 if we go ahead with this sale.
Yes, absolutely.
In fact, it would be so well within. We're anticipating to really see a sizable savings to the taxpayer over time, much less than we ever dreamed of having these incredibly low.
That's right.
Thank you, Ms. Betts. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Board members, any additional questions or comments?
Dr. Santa Cruz, I wanted to make a comment. I just want to point out this slide, we are providing a lot of maintenance and repair and upkeep to facilities that the taxpayer has already funded and paid for. And then we're working to keep them in very good condition for our students. And we're putting some money into areas that I think are just exciting. Our athletic facilities, our performing arts venues, much less, the day-to-day things like flooring and restroom remodels. I just think that it's critically important that we protect the investment taxpayers have already made by keeping those facilities in great shape. And I'm really excited to see some of these as they come to fruition.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries, and I would echo that sentiment. Board members, anything else? Seeing none, then we will vote on item 7.04, adoption of resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of school improvement bonds. All those in favor would signify by saying aye. Those opposed would signify by saying nay. And Ms. Wilson, would you please poll the board?
Mary Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Reed Carr,
Aye.
Ms. Sheila Udetti,
Aye.
Ms. Jill Humphries,
Aye.
Mr. Charles Santa Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 5 ayes.
Thank you. The motion passes. We'll now move, and I'd like to thank Mr. Davis, Ms. Burke, Mr. Giles, and Ms. Betts for your work and your presentation regarding this resolution.
Thank you very much, Dr. Santa Cruz.
Thank you. We'll now move to item 8, request for future agenda items. Board members, if you have something, please submit it to Gabby, and she will make sure that we get it at least reviewed for discussion. We'll now move to item 9. Yes. Sounded like someone had a comment. We'll now move to item 9, board committee reports. Item 9.01, Gilbert Education Foundation, Ms. Humphries.
Yes, I want to report that we had our our scholarship virtual reception where we had 11 scholarship winners. And then also we awarded, I believe, something like 23 varsity letters in volunteerism. It was online on Friday night. Very well done, a very good presentation. And we're very thankful for our sponsors who helped fund those scholarships, and just really incredible that so many students have given so many volunteer hours. So we're looking forward. Also, I do want to mention that Mrs. Dudson forwarded to us something that she had received a previous scholarship winner. She won the I Believe in Me scholarship, which was tuition to a community college for 2 years. And she has fulfilled that obligation and has her associate's degree. And we're just really proud of her for continuing in school and investing in herself to grow her capacity.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphries. Item 9.02, City of Mesa Liaison, Ms. Woods.
Yes, I just wanted to report, I spoke with Kevin Thompson, the city councilman over the area that we have with Gilbert Public Schools. He just wanted to pass on that they received $90 million as part of the CARES Act. Some of that's going towards schools for technology. We will continue to follow up and see. That will be with Mesa Schools, Mesa Public Schools, and GPS. So I'll follow up and see how that will be used in GPS. And then he wanted our families to know that United Food Bank and House of Refuge are providing food boxes to anyone that needs food. United Food Bank is on Fridays and House of Refuge is on Thursdays and Fridays. And hopefully as a community, we can come together and continue to support those who have needs in this time. And we know there's many. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Item 9.03, Town of Gilbert Liaison, Mr. Carr.
Dr. Santa Cruz, I have not had any further communication with the town of Gilbert since our last meeting, so I don't have anything to update.
And Mr. Carr, if you would just pass along for the board and from the superintendent. And I know Dr. McCord was instrumental in getting this done, but thank the mayor and the town council for the lighting of the water tower in celebration of our graduates.
I will pass that on. I thought it was a great show of support.
Thank you, sir. Item 9.04, Finance and Audit Committee. Mr. Carr, anything there?
The committee postponed its meeting with the suspension of everything going on. We've scheduled it out in the future, so nothing to report.
Thank you, sir. Item 9.05, Insurance and Trust Representative, Ms. Uggetti.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz. We had probably the shortest trust meeting today that I think I've ever been in attendance. Everything is going well, and I just wanted to add that the trust is now paying for any COVID or antibody any of the employees that belong to it, as long as their doctor feels it's necessary. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Uggetti. Item 9.06, Legislative Representative Committee Report, and you were involved in that committee report, and we'll hopefully meet our deadline this Friday and get our information into the ASBA Legislative Committee so it can be entertained and reviewed and pushed during the next legislative session. Otherwise, I have nothing else to report. Move to item 10. Dr. McCord, 10.01, meeting dates.
Our next meeting will be Tuesday, June 9th. It'll be a board work study as well as a brief board meeting. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. And go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
Could you clarify the time? I know that we talked about a different time, but I believe it's 6:30 until August. Is that?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. So 6:30, and then starting in August, it will be moved to the 6 o'clock.
Yeah, if there's a meeting like late July, I don't have that one in front of me. There might be a meeting at the end of July. I don't know if you can see that there, Gabby, or maybe I. But at the end of the. Go ahead.
It's July 28th.
July 28th will be the first 6 p.m. meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Thank you, Dr. McCord. Ms. Wilson?
Dr. Santa Cruz, question
Yes,
sort of
sir.
related to that. With all of the efforts to determine how we move with school, as we discussed earlier tonight, is there the possibility that we may have to schedule a board meeting to approve anything so that they can move forward with those plans? It's kind of a moving target.
I would agree, and I would implore the board to be alert to the possibility that Mr. McCord and I may need your assistance and support prior to July 20, whatever that was, 8th, just to finalize plans or any details that Dr. McCord sees are important for us to interact with. So I appreciate that comment. Would that be correct, Dr. McCord?
That is correct. I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Carr. Again, we will present to you on June 23rd the thoughts from the committee and subcommittee, but there may be a time between June 23rd and the beginning of July or mid-July that we have to come down on a final decision if that isn't made by June 23rd. I have a hard time believing that a final decision will be made on the 23rd. Not that the plans will be readily available, but again, taking a test run of what's going on within our community and in our state and in our country, those things could change on a dime.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. And as we prepare to adjourn, my final commentary is appreciation and thank you to you and to your entire team. And I'm talking not just your administrative team, but your entire team, from the groundskeepers and cafeteria staff to the instructors in the classroom to the support service people, for all that they did to help us end the school year as efficiently as we could have under the circumstances, and all the work that was done in preparation for this very, very unprecedented time. So We appreciate all those efforts on behalf of the district by everyone who works for this organization and to the parents who support this organization as well. So we appreciate everyone's effort.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we are now at item 11, adjournment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Urgetti. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. There is no need for discussion, I suspect. And so we will stand adjourned.
Oh, we need to vote.
That's probably part of that. Thank you, Ms. Humphries. All those in favor, we'll do a voice vote. We won't bother Ms. Wilson. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by saying nay. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your attention and time tonight. And for those of you on live stream, we bid you a good night.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.